thank you all for coming today. This is Intro to Filmmaking, Intro to Videography. One of the things that we get most from everybody that comes to our events is, they're taking a lot of photos and they want to get into video, but video's kind of daunting to get into. So this is kind of the perfect class to just get your toes in the water and get a little bit more comfortable. My name is, that's not working. My name is Cooper O'Hearn. Is it working now? There we go.
There we go.
My name's Cooper O'Hearn. I grew up in Colorado. Growing up in Colorado, I had a bunch of friends that were really great at skiing, biking, all of the action sports. So I got really into filmmaking when my friends would need someone to follow them around mountain trails, filming them bike and in the winter and stuff like that. And so through that, I got a GoPro when I was 12. And I would just do fun little videos with my friends. And through that, I started shooting all the sports for my high school. I became the editor of my yearbook for all of my years in my high school. And then from there, I started filming for the Colorado Buffaloes football team. This is Ralphie 4. They have a buffalo that they run around the field. For 1 year of my time there, I was the gimbal operator that would pretty much chase players around, chase the buffalo around, and just get the cinematic footage for the team. And through the team, we would make a documentary every year. I would make all the hype videos. We would film all the games, all the practices. Now, Colorado, I don't know if you guys follow them. They're a really bad football team, so you had to get really creative trying to shoot trying to turn a loss into something that's a little bit more exciting than a loss. After my years at Colorado, in 2022, I moved to New York. In New York, I started, on top of working for B&H, I started filming for the NFL. I shoot for the Giants. I also shoot the Giants lose pretty much every game that they play. And I also shoot for comedians around here, and I just do a whole bunch of stuff. So I shoot for the Giants social media and the NFL social media, and then I shoot sets and travel videos for a bunch of just wacky comedians that are in New York and Philly. So there's me. I'm always in the background. I'm never really in the foreground, so this is kind of weird for me. I'm Cooper O'Hearn on Instagram, and so I thought the best way to start today's seminar off would be to show one of my most proud films that I've made. This is probably the best example of what I'm trying to get you all to do today. I'm about to show you a video that I made called Rats, Etc. It was something that when I moved here, I was like, somebody needs to make a really great film all in the subway of New York. And so I spent about 1.5 years filming footage in the subway, making a lot of people mad, and this is what came of it. So that's rats. And that's kind of the theme of today. I started out just saying I really want to make a, how did these turn off? That's crazy.
That was me.
Wow.
I didn't want to have any glare.
You're right. That's for the viewer experience. That's important. But the theme of today is, you know, to make that whole thing, it was pretty much just getting up and going out and filming in the subway for an hour or two once a weekend for pretty much a year and a half. And so every time I would go out, you know, all I really thought was I just, you know, maybe I want to get a really good shot of a subway riding adjacent to another moving car and getting everybody inside of that little box that's moving next to you. Or, you know, I want to go out and get really good rap footage or, you know, whatever it may be, or a good performer or something like that. And so it really just was starting of, this would be a cool idea. I'm just going to go out and see how much footage I can go and get for that and see how great of a video I can make of all of that footage. And obviously that's a ton of footage. So that was probably, in total, for that 2-minute video, around 4 terabytes of footage that I filmed for that whole thing. And I was filming in 4K, so, you know, bigger file sizes, but still a mountain of footage for me to go to. And so things like that take time, and it just really takes a lot of repetition. But to start out, to, you know, take those first steps, you need to know the principles of videography to make sure everything you're filming isn't wasted and you're not just wasting your time. So the most obvious tenet for all you photographers, photography compared to videography, you're getting 1 split second in time, and videography, you're just capturing an entire scene play out, and that just takes a lot more attention and time to the camera to effectively capture what you want to capture. So getting into photography where, you know, your camera might have high megapixels for, you know, the resolution of your photos, it's the same for resolutions in your camera for videography. So the most two common resolutions are 1080p and 4K. The standard today is 4K, and that's a really nice file format for you to film in. And but 1080p that's great for social media. That's good for YouTube. Smaller file sizes, it's easy to edit, and then 4K is when you get to much higher quality. It allows you to crop into your frame, reframe your shot, and, you know, make what was a not so interesting shot a lot more interesting by just cropping in and isolating whatever your subject is. But those are sometimes huge files. It takes a lot more storage, and it's going to be a lot harder for you to edit depending on what you're editing on. Or just kind of more of a pain. So I think all of your cameras will be able to shoot in 1080p, that's what I would suggest. The lower you go from 1080p, you know, I think a lower one that's more common is 720p, and that's about as low as you want to go. I think under that, you get to the unwatchable levels of video where it's just kind of like a mess of pixels and you don't even know what you're looking at. So I would stick to 1080 if you can, and if you can film in 4K, film in 4K. That's, you know, that's all your stuff is going to look really nice.
If someone's just starting out, would you recommend staying away from 4K just because of the larger file size, the longer rendering time?
Yeah, you know, I shot in 1080 for 10 years. It wasn't until I shoot on the Canon C70, it wasn't until I got that a couple of years ago when I could finally shoot 4K. But I think you really want to, you know, sharpen your teeth with 1080. You want to figure out your style and, you know, how to film with 1080, because I mean, as you guys saw in Rats, I'm filming a ton. And when you're filming a ton, videos are much different than photos. That's going to take up hundreds of gigabytes on your computer or your hard drive. So, you know, I think you want to learn with 1080 and then upgrade yourself to 4K. But, you know, you can start with both. But 1080 it's just much easier to work with. So one of the most important parts of filmmaking and videography is frame rates. And so there are 3 main frame rates. They are 24 FPS, which is what we call real time. That's going to give you cinematic motion blur, and it's what's used in movies. And that's what I typically use. It just really gives you a really nice, just cinematic looking frame. There's 30 FPS that's used for TV and broadcast. People call this the realistic look. I don't really use it that much, so I don't know if I really agree with that. And then there's 60 FPS, and that's when you're starting to get into the slow motion realm. And I use 60 FPS when I'm shooting sports. Then you're able to really smoothly slow down your shots and make things much more dramatic. And anything lower than 60 FPS, you're not going to be able to do anything slow motion. And then a more common nowadays is even slower. That's 120 FPS, and that's not for everyday use. You know, that's some really cinematic, slowed down footage that you're going to be getting. It's really cool, but it's just not practical. It is awesome though, and I love shooting in 120. One key thing to remember is as you increase your frame rate, your exposure is going to decrease, and that's just, you know, so if you're in 24, you're going to have a much brighter image than you will in 59 or 60. And so this is probably the most important thing to remember when talking about frame rates and the exposure triangle is when you're using a specific frame rate, you have to make sure that your shutter speed is double your frame rate, no more, no less, because any more it's going to look weirdly sharp and stuttery and just not natural, and then any less it's going to look smeared and dreamy, kind of like a long exposure photo, but just weirder because it's a video, so it all just looks choppy and strange. And these can both be intended artistic looks, but if you're not intending to have that artistic look, it's going to make your footage just look weird, and you're going to be looking at it and think, what the hell is wrong with this? And so just general rule of thumb for 24 FPS, do 1/50th of a second shutter speed, 30, 1/60th, 60, 1/20th. This was something that it took me a while to figure this out, especially when I was a teenager. I would always just crank up my shutter speed to fix my exposure of my shot, and I didn't really realize what that was doing to the actual output of the image. So if I was shooting on a bright sunny day, I would bump my shutter speed up to like 1/400th of a second, and then I'd get in the editing booth and I'd be like, why does everybody look weird? And I couldn't figure it out. And so just stick to this, and your footage is going to look acceptable and good. And yes, you can. The iPhone will have the frame rate up in the top right corner, and you can just click that and click through your options, and it'll give you 24, 30, or 60. And then they have a slow-mo mode. I don't recommend that on the iPhone. That always looks weird.
And it won't give you the ability to change the shutter speed. You won't have to change that. So anybody using a phone camera, really anything that doesn't have manual control, if you have like a camcorder or a smaller camera that doesn't have manual control, you won't have to worry about shutter speed. It's going to be baked in. It's basically going to be like an auto setting on your camera. If you can change the frame rate, like the iPhone, you can change your resolution, you can change your frame rate, but you don't have to worry about shutter speed. And
you can use auto as much as you want. You know, auto is not off the table, but just know when you're using auto, it's going to be different than in photography, because when you're recording, the auto is just going to start changing aspects of your exposure and your settings as it sees fit. So in your recorded video, you're going to start to see the picture just start, change as the video plays along, as the camera's interpreting more stuff. And that's mostly unfixable as you start to edit your footage. Yeah. I don't think auto is as accurate as manual. I think auto's well-intentioned. It will always try and be as accurate as it can, but a lot of times it's going to misread what your scene is. And we'll get to the auto white balance and everything there. Yeah.
That's a good question.
I recommend do your best to shoot in manual. That's just your best bet of learning everything as well, and your best bet of having everything look how you want it to look.
That's where video and stills kind of, like I said earlier, where a lot of stuff parallels. That's where video kind of veers off, where, like Cooper's saying, and he'll go into some of the, the like white balance, why you won't want to use auto settings, because again, there's nothing worse with video. With a still, if you mess up one frame and you shoot it in RAW, you can fix it. With video, if you mess up a clip, I can't tell you the amount of times we've sat there and we've talked about, man, I love this clip, but this happened.
Use it.
Or the white balance. I had auto white balance, and the white balance shifted in the middle of the clip, and that clip
And
is
we'll
done.
get to white balance. I'm going to say this right now. Do not do auto white balance. That's going to ruin every shoot day that you have. I've had way too many days where auto white balance just destroys my hope and dreams.
And especially for a lot of stuff we're outside. If you've taken notice of what's going on outside, it's bright, dark, you're in the middle of a 5-second clip and the light shifts and you're in auto, and what happens? There's a visible walt in your exposure. You
go from a blue image to an orange image, and now you can't even fix that. We'll get to that later. We're way jumping ahead of the gun. We'll get to that too. I edit with Premiere, but there are a lot of options that I think all of them are pretty good. One thing that goes hand in hand with shutter speed. And in sports, I'm always doing 60 because I always want to slow it down. To keep your exposure appropriate and still looking good, you want an ND filter. And this is like the cheat code for making sure that all of your footage looks good all of the time. And that's what we sell plenty of them here. So if you guys don't have one, go get a few. But yeah, that's an ND filter that I use a lot. My camera has ND filters built in. But this allows you to keep your settings exactly how you want them and keep your exposure in check at the same time.
What do you recommend stop-wise for ND? For people who are mostly going to be shooting outside?
I think 3 to 4 stops of ND is really good. You know what? 3 to 6 stops of ND. I think the C70 has 6 stops of ND. But if you want to be shooting at a wide open aperture, and the correct shutter speed and ISO, not in an appropriate area, you're going to want an ND. If you're shooting in those settings on a bright day, your whole image without an ND filter is just going to be completely white, completely blown out. And the only real way to fix that without an ND filter is to start changing your settings. And you just don't want to do that if you're going for an artistic or look for your footage. So get an ND filter. It's just putting sunglasses on your camera and making sure that you can maintain your shooting settings while also maintaining an appropriate exposure that doesn't make you die in the coloring booth, So ND filter's huge. And then the rest of the exposure triangle, this parallels photography pretty well. Aperture still controls depth of field. But the only difference in aperture and video is now your objects are moving, so you're going to have to be tracking them. And when you're shooting at a wide open aperture, when you're filming, it's a lot harder to track your subjects at an f2 rather than it would be at an f8. And if you're changing your aperture while you're shooting and you're recording, you're going to start to see very noticeable jumps in depth and exposure. And it just kind of ruins your shot unless that's what you're going for.
It's kind of the same thing as we were saying before within auto mode. A lot of the cameras now, the video settings, if you're shooting talking head content where you're sitting there, it's great. Use your eye autofocus. There's a lot of cameras that have a lot of great autofocus. But again, there's nothing worse than there's a shot you're filming and you have the autofocus going, and you might not notice it on your screen, but then when you get the file up on your computer, the autofocus is or you're focus searching, or it's bouncing from one subject to another. So that's this is another area where you have to be careful. When he talks about pulling focus, you guys know what he's referring to, pulling focus? So manually adjusting that focus to...
So if I have a football player that's running toward me and I'm not using autofocus, I'm having to adjust the focus ring and follow him all the way down the field and hopefully keep him in that shallow area of focus to make sure the shot is usable. And so that's just one thing to think about when you're choosing your aperture and when using your aperture in videography is when your subject is moving, it's a lot harder to keep it in focus. And and then ISO. ISO is Also, same principle as photography.
So he asked if there's a difference between using auto and program. It all depends on the camera. So some cameras you'll have to switch to a film set, like a video setting, and that will kind of wipe that off the table. It really changes depending on the system. I can take a look at your camera and see, but auto and program one's kind of like a smart auto. So auto and program are very, very, very similar. It's just a matter of what your camera controls. If your camera controls all the exposure settings or just a couple of the exposure settings. So it's tough to give an absolute answer on that. It really depends on the camera. Some cameras will have just a record button where you can just hit a record button. You don't have to put it in a video mode. You can put it in a video mode if you want, or you can hit the record button. It all depends on the camera system. So if anybody has a question, once we finish the intro, we'll have time to go over if anybody has questions on their individual cameras, because it's really hard to give a blanket answer for something like that, because it might be something that's the same on your camera but different on someone else's camera.
Yeah. So ISO, same principle as photography. ISO is the part of the exposure triangle that is controlling how sensitive your camera is to light. And so in photography, obviously, the higher you bump your ISO, the grainier your image is, but that's even more intense in video because I don't know if you guys know anything about low light in your cameras, or shooting at sunset, or just when there's less available light and you really have to bump your ISO up. When you're bumping your ISO up very high in video, you lose a lot of detail, a lot of dynamic range. And the noisier your image gets, it's splotchy and moving around the frame, so it's very noticeable. So the higher you bump your ISO, it's just much more noticeable in video. And if you bump it too high, you might start getting bars that are flickering on your screen, and your video just starts to get kind of weird looking.
Yeah, you get muddy. The details and your shadows will become muddy.
Yeah. Which
is one thing, again. In a still shot, you can fix that. You can put noise correction on there, and it's not going to be as bad. But with video, everything's accentuated. So that muddiness is going to turn into an entire muddy frame that you might have to throw out. I didn't know if you were going to go into native.
Yeah. And so then every camera has a native ISO as well. And my camera, the native ISO is 800 ISO, and that's just the ISO that your camera performs best at, or what your image is going to look best at. So my native ISO range is 800 to 2500. On most DSLRs, it's just 100, and that's just the ISO that your camera is going to be producing the best images for you. And so I always try and keep my camera at 800 ISO, nothing below that, because then I'm getting the most out of what I'm trying to shoot. So on top of this, we already touched on this, but white balance. White balance is just telling you what the true white is in your camera, or what you're filming, and you have to set it correctly so all of the colors that you're filming look normal. And back to auto white balance. The one thing that I tell all of my friends or people that are getting into videography, the things to know about videography is, one, get an ND filter, and two, do not use auto white balance. If you see AWB on your screen, run for the hills. Throw your camera in the Hudson River. You're done. It's because auto white balance, like we were saying earlier, like let's say I'm filming Derek right now, we got the black background and it's on auto white balance. It's gonna give a white balance to Derek right there, and then if I move it out the window, it's gonna jump 1,000 degrees. And then so you go from a much bluer image to an orange image, and now you just have a weirdly colored video. You can't really color correct against that. I think historically people have, but it's one of the biggest
You're creating
pains.
a headache for yourself,
Yeah,
and then it's that moment of the change that really makes it difficult.
It's really hard to fix that transition because all the colors in your image are changing. So I would always say, set your white balance to 5600 Kelvin, that's daylight, and then just shoot everything in that, and then you can change that in post however is appropriate or how much you want to. That just makes it so much easier. It saves such a headache for you in post-production. And then now here are 2 modes on your camera that you can set. These really help me in pretty much everything that I do. You have focus peaking and you have the zebra function. The zebra function is showing you all of the overexposed parts of your shot. So it'll give you all of these zebra lines all over your image if you have a really overexposed shot, and then you can fix your exposure and it'll start to fix itself. It'll start to show you what's best exposed in the frame. And then peaking will show you, will outline everything in focus. So everything in focus will be outlined in like a red or a yellow or a blue. Don't use blue, blue kind of sucks. But that's showing you everything that's in focus, and that's a lifesaver if you're, especially if you're shooting in on a bright day and you're looking at your tiny screen on your camera and you don't really know what's in focus. The focus peaking is really going to save you here, and it'll always show you what's in focus, and that way you have a much lower probability of missing a shot. Because I mean, one of the things that still gets me every time is when I pull a shot that I'm really excited about into my editing booth, and then I see that it's everything I wanted to be in focus is just slightly out of focus, and it's a pain. So focus peaking has saved me a lot of times, and so is zebra. Zebra doesn't lie. Even if the image looks good on your screen, throw the zebra on, just make sure, because an overexposed video, you can do a lot to save it, but there's a lot of things that just get ruined in the overexposure of your video.
And one thing before we move on focus peaking, not all camera systems are created equal. Check out your system. Focus peaking on some cameras is going to be better than it is on other systems. Mm-hmm. There's various modes to have a kind of like a second set, like a correction or a manual adjustment for your manually focusing. You could have prism. You could have a dual image, split image. So go into and see what your camera offers as far as a checkpoint for your manual focusing. I have gone in, I've used focus peaking on certain camera systems, and I've gone in and I'm like, wow, I'm back focused. Mm-hmm. Or my focus peaking isn't, or sometimes it's your setting. Sometimes you're filming in low light and the focus peaking is picking up that digital noise, mm-hmm. and showing that digital noise as something that's in focus when it's really not. Every camera system is subject to making a mistake, right? It's reading algorithms, it's reading things that might not necessarily be there. So go in and find out what you're most comfortable with, and also what is best for your camera system, because a lot of that is going to be native to your way towards working and what you have available in your camera system.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if the Osmo Pocket has focus peaking. It probably has zebras, I'm not sure. But it's a lifesaver for me. I would always suggest this. And
we'll consult Joe Chad at a later date.
Yeah,
and get back to you.
Joe Chad right in the back, shout out. But yeah, these are 2 great tools to just keep you in check and help you not worry about things that you shouldn't have to be worrying about when you're shooting. And so into audio, I'll just touch on this lightly. Pretty much every camera has a built-in microphone, and that's going to give you good scratch audio. It's not unusable, but it's very below average. It's by no means professional audio. It's just kind of there to say, hey, this is what the scene sounded like if you want to match it up with a better microphone or something like that. I use a shotgun mic just on top of my camera. Those are really fantastic for just picking up focused audio of whatever's happening in front of your camera. I use that I bring that to football games. I'm getting the loud crowd noise. It's unusable. But I bring that on anything I do with the comedians I work for. It's just a really easy way to make sure you have some form of usable audio. And they can range in prices. You know, I think I got that one for around $100, probably less, and it works really great. I've been using it for 3 years now.
Is there a decibel level where you try to hit when you're recording?
I try and keep it right around like -6, I think, because that keeps you. We'll get to peaking in a second, but yeah. So peaking and clipping, that is just when your audio is reaching the maximum amount of the maximum level that your microphone can record. And once your audio peaks and clips, you can't fix it. So a really loud noise will, shoot your audio levels up, and then there's no way to bring it down to a listenable level. And then one other microphone type that I often use is a lav mic. That's just the clip-on mic, similar to what I'm wearing on my face, but clip onto someone's shirt, and that's what's getting really great dialogue. And you can easily hide those, and so those are common on film sets. I use them with comedians when they're doing sets. But that's getting a little bit more into the weeds. I don't expect anybody to have a lav ready to use today, and I don't really think,
for this.
Yeah, unless you're interviewing a homeless man, you don't need a lav. And
So a lot
even
based
then,
on the application, right? Like for what you're or what you're filming
Yeah.
is going to dictate what kind of mic you're using. For
definitely.
the right
And
setup.
so I typically use a shotgun mic for pretty much everything I do. That gets the job done, and it's always usable audio. So here's another one. We won't get too into the weeds on color profiles. There's standard color profiles, that's called Rec 709 typically, and then there are log color profiles. Most cameras can shoot in log these days. I think the iPhone can shoot in log now. What log is that's just giving you pretty much a contrastless image that you can manipulate to color grade it and make whatever look or feel you want for that. So this is what log footage looks like, and you can manipulate that however you want. If this were a clear day, you could probably manipulate this color. This is obviously a very sunny day. You can manipulate that color to look like a dark, gloomy, scary day and mood. And that's what's really great for log. That's for people who really want to get into color grading. Log footage just gives you so much more information in the whole exposure spectrum of your image. And so I shoot pretty much everything I can in log because as you guys get further along your videography track, color grading really adds an extra degree to, just a really great extra degree to whatever videos you're trying to make. It can make your images just really pop and make it much more emotional than however you were intending or however you shot it. And this is a standard color profile. This is Rec 709 right out of my camera. Rec 709 is pretty much just how we see the world. And so you can color correct this a lot as well. You just don't have the flexibility that log will allow you. So for today, I would suggest everybody just film in Rec 709, and maybe that's all you can film in, so nothing to worry about. But that'll just give you pretty much what you're expecting the footage to look like. And then there are a couple good editing softwares out there. I think most of them are good. I don't think there's any rhyme or reason to which one you should use that'll give you a better output for videos. Maybe iMovie won't give you as good of a video as Adobe Premiere will, but there's Adobe Premiere, DaVinci Resolve, Final Cut Pro, and iMovie. And then there are a few more that I didn't list. I use Adobe Premiere. I love Premiere because it's pretty much endless possibilities for what you want to do with your footage. You can do so much in effects and color and speed and all sorts of things. And DaVinci Resolve is pretty much the exact same thing, just a different user interface. All of these cost money, but DaVinci Resolve has a really fantastic free version that I would suggest everybody download if you don't have an editing software yet. Adobe products run pretty expensive. Final Cut Pro, I think it's like I think you pay $200 once, and then you have it for life. And then iMovie comes free. iMovie, you're really going to be limited, unless you're making a video for your aunt's birthday or something. You don't need anything more than iMovie. But Final Cut Pro is really great. I started on Final Cut Pro. But if you don't have an editing software, I would use DaVinci Resolve and get the free version. It'll give you everything that you need for your starting days. And then as you get better, you can upgrade to the full version and you'll unlock whatever else that has. I would get the free version of DaVinci Resolve. I know so many people that have gotten it and they're able to do pretty much everything that I'm able to do in Premiere for free, and that's really great. And then a big thing with video is you really got to be careful with your file storage. I can't even tell you guys the amount of computers that I've destroyed in just carelessly offloading my footage. My mother was a graphic designer, so I would get her hand-me-down computers every time she would upgrade. And then within a year, I'm just offloading all of my footage to my internal hard drive on that computer. And then after a while, it just can't think anymore and the whole thing just crashes. I would always suggest get an external SSD, an external drive of some sort, and always offload your footage onto that. Don't put it on your computer's internal hard drive because then it's going to run slower. And definitely do not edit your footage off of an SD card. SD cards fail, you'll lose everything, they're not fast. Just go for an external drive, get an SSD. I use Samsung T7s. Those are fantastic. They're really fast read and write speeds, and you can carry them pretty much everywhere you go. And what I do is I offload my footage onto there, and then I can plug that right into my phone, and I can get it off of the drive. It's very, very easy, and just the smartest way to do it. I probably have 4 or 5 multi-terabyte SSD drives that I carry around with me at all times. Sometimes with my footage, my important footage, like my rats video, I have that footage saved on like 3 different drives, so just so I never lose it. If you guys are Harry Potter fans, we call that a Horcrux, and that's just copying it to multiple different places and being able to use it.
And come up with a workflow, because if you are editing a program, it's going to have that. So in Premiere, you're going to have that Premiere file saved. And if you have that Premiere file saved, and that's on an external hard drive, if you're trying to work on that file and your files are over here, your Premiere file is here, and you don't have either of those drives. So you're going to want to come up with a video workflow, because you're going to have everything, know where it is, and it's going to have to be in the same place.
Put it all in the same place.
There's nothing worse than, especially if you're working on the go and you have all of your files on an external hard drive, and you're like, oh, well, because I work on, I have a home desktop. I have a Mac Mini, a MacBook, and if I don't have that Adobe file copied onto my MacBook or onto that hard drive where I have my workable files, I go out and I have my laptop and I have my external hard drive, but I don't have that Adobe file saved. And now when it goes to pull up that Adobe file with everything in there, I don't have it. And so make sure you come up with a workflow for it.
And so what's great is, I'll have all of my footage for a project on one drive. I can bring it to and from work. I can open it at home, open the project file on that drive, and work on everything right there. And then let's say I need to go to work and I'm going to bring that drive with me. I can open the exact same project on my work computer and I can work on it right there. All of your stuff is in the exact same place and you have nothing to worry about losing it or anything. For video, I think any external hard drive for photography works, but for video, I really suggest doing a Samsung T7 or a T9. I shoot on a 128 gigabyte SD card, but I'm shooting in 4K. I rarely ever fill the whole thing up, and so I typically will have 1 or 2 of those in my camera at all times, just to make sure I have the space. But if you're shooting in 1080, unless you're shooting for an entire day, I don't think you really need anything over 64 gigs. Yeah, so I'm always shooting on a 128 gigabyte card. I know the B&H video team, they're always shooting on 128 gigabyte cards. So yeah, allow yourself enough space.
You have a fast read write, it's only as fast as your computer. Your process is only going to be as fast as the slowest link in that chain. So if you have a fast computer and a slow drive, you're only moving as fast as that drive. So the one big difference, and I'm sure Cooper's going to go way into depth as we edit, is huge files. And when you're taking huge files and you're piecing them together, it's just creating a ginormous
and you're
file.
scrubbing through them, and you're watching the whole thing, or you're going back and going forth.
It's using virtual memory, so the same way as a preview. If you're looking at still images and the program has to upload previews so that you can preview everything fast, as you scrub through a video file, that's all using up virtual memory on your computer. So it's just a super labor-intensive and space-intensive operation. And use the right cord for it. Don't just pull the one that you charge your phone on and plug it in and think that it's gonna power, because a lot of times there's certain particular, like SanDisk Professional, if you don't use the right cord for like the SanDisk Professional SSDs, it will either not read or it'll be really slow. So again, it's all about conductivity.
And you're gonna find yourself, the slower it goes, and if you're not using the right setup, you're gonna find yourself just getting so frustrated with your workflow. Like why is this taking so long? Why isn't it working how I want it to work? And it's as simple as you have the wrong cord, or you're just not using a fast enough drive. And it can be really frustrating, and like this was years of headache for me. So this is a big thing. But yeah, any questions on files or anything like that? And then here's one last basic thing to just know as you're getting into videography. There are static shots, there are pans and tilts. A pan where you're moving your camera from side to side, you're staying in the same place, or up and down and you're staying in the same place. There are dolly and slider shots, and that's just when you're moving the camera along a smooth track. Those are really great. That's one of my favorite kinds of shots. Shout out dolly slider shots. And then you can use a tripod, you can use a gimbal, you can go handheld. Doing all of that, that'll give you a different feel for how your video plays and how your video comes off. So if you're shooting handheld, it's gonna feel very personal, and it's gonna feel a lot more emotional, I think. On a tripod, that's really great for establishing shots or interviews. And then on a gimbal, that's an electronic stabilizer that you use to just give you smooth footage. Osmo Pocket, that's a gimbal camera. And then in that picture of me running with the buffalo, I had a gimbal in my hand, and it's allowing you to move the camera while minimizing all of that camera shake that you would otherwise get while handheld. I shoot handheld pretty much all the time. I think that's the easiest. It's really easy to move around and go and change up your shot, or just move the camera around if you just have it in your hand, rather than having to move a tripod up and down or lug a 20-pound gimbal everywhere you go. Having a gimbal is awesome, and your footage is really cool, but you also have to remember that it's 20 pounds, and your shoulder strength and core strength plays into that.
Well, and stylistic.
Yeah,
and if you have too much gimbal stabilized footage, it can create.
There are times when you're like, I'm going to use a gimbal for this, it's going to be great, and then you're in a tighter space than you imagined, and now you can't really move. And the whole point of a gimbal is you want to be moving around to show how still the camera is, and so. These are all appropriate for different situations. I always go handheld. I just love the look of it, and especially in a video like my rats video, that just allowed me to be able to adapt to the scene quickly and go and change things up. Or if I see something interesting way over there, I can just go run over there and go get that, rather than having to pick up a tripod or, rebalance the gimbal. You guys get what I'm saying. And so now that was kind of the nitty gritty, camera settings part of this. Now here are some of my filming tips. So the biggest thing that you can do is, like the rats video, is just find yourself a good idea that you want to pursue, and just go out and do it. Find your friends and say, hey, let's go sledding and let me film it. Or, I want to go. One of the videos that I've always wanted to make, if you follow me on Instagram, I'm always posting pictures of the disgusting street water on the corners. So I've always wanted to make a video of just going and getting really great shots of all of these disgusting puddles with trash and feces in them, you know, and showing the beauty of New York through the disgusting streets that we walk by every day. And literally come up with an idea about anything and just go try and pursue it. And in pursuing that, you're going to find areas that, you know, you need to work on, things you did that were really good, things you didn't do so good, and how am I going to do that better for the next time. This is just the best way to just start pushing on the gas pedal and get yourself out there, because I've gone out and I've tried to film without any purpose, you know, and you know that works. I always come back with something that I like, but it's much better to give yourself some sort of purpose, go into the field, go try and get it, and even if you don't get what you were trying to go out there to get, you're gonna get 3 or 4 things that are just as good as what you were going for, and things that you're just as happy with. So this is, you know, just give yourself an excuse to go out and film. And then this was one, especially in my early days, I was watching a lot of different content creators and video makers. One of my favorite types of video was I loved watching travel videos, and there are some really fantastic travel videographers out there that I would watch their videos, and the only thing I'm thinking the whole time is, wow, I'm so jealous that they were able to get whatever that shot was. How the hell do I do something like that? So watch other people's stuff. It's going to give you more ideas for your own stuff, and then you'll go out and you'll try and replicate that in your own way, and then you get something that's your own. But you know, everything needs a little bit of inspiration, and then to piggyback off of that is shoot a lot as well. And one thing that I think I really excel at is I'm great at forcing myself off the couch to just go and shoot. You know, shooting in the subway can be daunting, but you're not going to get in there without saying, okay, I got to stop playing Minecraft and I got to go ride the subway for 2 hours. And just go and throw yourself into a situation, because action produces information. The more you do something, the more you're going to know what you're doing wrong, how to do things better. Like I said earlier, it's going to give you a nice path forming of how to get to the end point of a project, or you know, maybe a year from now you want to know how to do something really well. Nothing comes without practice, and especially with video, you have to force yourself to do it a lot. Maybe not force. I find myself forcing myself to do it a lot. But repetition, put yourself in diverse, weird situations, and do it enough to be in the right place at the right time for at least a couple of things. You're going to see a lot of people's work, and you're going to say, how did they get that shot with that interesting thing happening right in front of them? How were they so lucky to get a shot like that? They were in the right place at the right time, and there's no way around that besides just forcing yourself to go put yourself in situations. And then another huge one is waiting it out. You have to be patient, and waiting it out there's a big example is like I love filming pigeons around here. I think I have another video, it's called Pigeons, Etc. Not as good as rats.
Debatable.
But that's the start of the series. But like maybe you're waiting for the pigeons to take off of a light pole or something like that. You might be sitting there for 10 minutes to get it, but I swear to God, as soon as you leave and you say they're not taking off, you're going to take one step away, they're gone. So just wait for whatever you're filming to happen, and when you're filming whatever is happening, record for longer than you think you're going to need to record, because I mean, I've been yelled at by bosses for this. I've yelled at myself about this. You stop recording too soon, the worth of the shot is kind of lost whenever you stop recording too soon. Just record for 5 seconds more. You have 5 more seconds, and you want to make sure everything that you're filming, that whole thing has concluded, and whatever is coming after, you're hoping to get that as well. Just don't cut it too short, because when you're editing, I'm thinking of 1,000 different examples in my brain right now of when I'm editing and I'm looking at a shot, and then right as I stop recording, the thing that I wanted to include in the video starts happening right there, and then clip ends, can't do anything about it. So just record for longer than you think you should, and that'll save you a lot. And I think it'll just make you prouder of shots. You just give yourself the time to capture what you're intending to capture. And so when you're shooting a scene, so for today, when you go out there, look for establishing shots, medium action shots, close-ups, and transitions. So Derek and I were talking, let's say you're filming a guy reading a book sitting on a bench in front of the Empire State Building. To start the video, you don't want to just show the guy on the bench. Maybe you do, but you probably want to show where you're at. So get a big wide shot of the Empire State Building, establish a setting, and then a medium shot of the guy sitting on the bench right in front of the Empire State Building. You recognize the details in the medium shot as you do in the wide shot, and so now there's a continuity in your frames. And then get your close-up details. So get a shot of him turning the page, get a shot of his eyes looking at the pages, get a shot of his foot tapping on the ground, or maybe he reaches into his pocket and gets something. Get the details that he's doing to just bring his action more alive and just make the scene more believable for what you're trying to capture. And then try and find some transition shots as well. And a lot of my classic transitions is I'll just swipe the camera over to the left or the right and use that movement to get me to the next scene, or follow a car that takes you out of that setting or something like that.
The white box truck, one of my favorites.
Yeah.
He has this great transition. He has a box truck coming into the frame, and it's a big plain white box truck, so it kind of just wipes the frame, but it bleeds right into the next shot.
And then match that on the other side of that clip, match that up with another transition shot of something that's also white, and now you have a seamless flow from scene to scene. And so these are kind of your 4 main tenets of what to look for. It's easy to forget them, especially when you're if you're filming a homeless man and he's freaking out, you probably don't want to have to get all of these. You don't want to go up to him and be like, hey, can you pick that bottle out of the trash can again for me? Get what you can, but try your best to get as much as you can with every scene that you're trying to capture, because the more you have, the easier it is to just make a more compelling scene. And you'll notice that the more you get of this stuff, the more sophisticated your shooting becomes. And the more you practice this, it just kind of becomes like clockwork in your head. Like, okay, I got the medium shot, let's go, let's focus up on his hands, let's focus up on his eyes. What's he doing? Like, a crinkle of the nose says so much in just a small close-up shot. And whatever is going to bring you closer to that scene, you want it. And a big thing, this is one of my most proud sequences of shots from the Rats video, and also kind of ever. This guy was really drunk. He was smoking a cigarette in the subway. And so he's where Derek is, I'm right at the table, so I'm zoomed into him. And he took a drag of his cigarette, and then he looked directly at me. And that spooked me. So I ran away, but I was like, I'm not done filming him yet, because he's not done with his cigarette yet. So I went up to the platform above him, and I decided to shoot him from up there. So now I have 2 different perspectives of the same thing, and it really made for a really awesome sequence of events in the video. And so find a good vantage point. Get away from shooting at eye level. Every new photographer and videographer, they just kind of hold it right here, got the shot, whatever. Lay on the ground. Who cares what people are saying when they walk past you? Go find a way to elevate yourself. Or one classic thing is, like, if I have a fence or an obstruction in my scene, I try and get that in the foreground so I can add a little bit of depth to what I'm shooting, and just a little bit more of just a sense of feeling in the shot. And so I'll put something in the foreground, I'll have that out of focus, I'll have whatever I'm filming in the background or middle ground, and then now that scene is a lot more interesting than it would have been if I was just sitting right here, wide angle on him. And there's one guy I really like, he's always obstructing his frame. I've literally seen him take like a Ziploc bag that he'll find on the street and put that in front of the lens and just add a little bit of texture to what his shot is. And all of that, you know, those aren't going to be your main shots, but that adds a lot of just, it adds an enticing factor of difference to whatever your scene is that, one, you weren't expecting, and it just makes it so much more interesting. So do whatever you can to enhance your scene. And so the guy sitting on the bench reading the book, that's the focal point of your scene. Get everything else around him. I mean, we're in New York, so it's very easy for us, but there are so many things that you can capture in his surroundings that's just going to make the scene so much more believable. So maybe he's reading on the bench, and maybe there's a bird sitting on the other side of the bench. Get a shot of that bird, or you know, maybe a car goes by and it hits a really big puddle or something like that. Get everything that's happening around him to make the viewer feel more like they're entrenched right in that scene. And these shots are something that I don't even think a viewer would really even notice when they're watching it, but the difference that it makes in your storytelling is, it's really fantastic, and it just makes you feel so much more at home of, you know, what you're watching. So just don't be afraid to get B-roll, and just film as much as you can. Film everything. I like to film pretty much everything wherever I am. So just get as much as you can. And then one big thing that I'm always incorporating into my shots, add some element of movement to whatever you're shooting. Now, one thing that I'll do is I'll kind of sway or something like that, especially if I have something in the foreground, and you know, maybe like the fence in front of me is out of focus, and now when I move, the fence is slightly moving, and whatever is in the background is still, you know, it's static back there, because whatever movement you're doing, you can't really tell with that, but you know, something moving in the foreground, or maybe something in the frame is moving, that just establishes a lot more of a flow and can help with the emotional impact of whatever you're trying to film. So one thing that I will always do is, like, maybe if I'm moving from side to side, if my shot is moving from left to right, then I'll match that up with a shot where a man in the next frame is walking from left to right, but the shot is static. And that keeps a flow and keeps things interesting, keeps your viewer awake, makes it much more exciting. Add some form of motion. And it doesn't have to be much, but you know, just, it spices it up a little bit. And it helps you transition from one scene to another. And while you're out there, always think about what you're intending to edit out of the footage that you're getting. Just keeping that in mind, like maybe you get a great shot and you think, oh, this will be really great with this other shot that I got. Keep all of that fresh in your mind, and the edit is going to go much smoother. And getting to the end here, when you get done shooting, review every shot that you got. This is something that has always been tough for me. You know, I only want to go look at like the A tier shots that I got, but look at everything. Not every shot is a winner, but bad shots aren't useless. Oftentimes, I'll use my good shots as the main parts of the video, and then I'll use my bad shots as my fillers or my transitions, or shots that'll get me from point A to point B and help me bridge a gap that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to bridge without even knowing that a bad shot exists. So look at your bad shots. I guarantee there's at least one element of every bad shot that you get that is usable. And just don't discriminate against your shots. Allow yourself to say, it's like using every part of the buffalo, you know. Don't throw anything away if you think you can use it. And, you know, try things out. Maybe there's a shot that's not worth putting in, but just go try it out, speed it up, flip it, you know, like flip it on its axis or whatever, and changing a shot in post. We'll get into this later, but it can really add a lot more than you would have seen otherwise. And then I think last but not least is start editing as soon as you can. I've made this mistake a lot of times where I just let my footage build up, and as I've been explaining, sometimes I have thousands of gigabytes of footage, and so you go out and you shoot and you get 200 gigs of footage, you get home, you offload it, you sit down, you start watching Game of Thrones, and then next day you go out, you get 200 more gigs of footage, you put it in the folder, and then next episode or whatever. The more that piles up, the more of a daunting kind of nightmare you're building for yourself when you're trying to decipher what should go in your project and what shouldn't. So the closer or the sooner you look at your footage after you've shot, the fresher those shots are going to be in your mind, and you're going to be able to pinpoint where to go and pinpoint what to use a lot easier. One example of this that went really poorly for me was when I was making one of the documentaries for the Buffs in college. I was shooting for a year and a half again and trying to get as much footage of Colorado, the mountains, the football team, because I wanted to make this huge, big, grand video, or I guess introduction for one of the documentaries. And I didn't start editing for like 14 months. And then when I started editing, I barely even knew what my idea was anymore. And I'm looking at all of this footage, and I'm like, okay, well, I have so many great shots. I don't really know where to find them. And you start placing things together, and it's just kind of like a, what am I even doing anymore? It's very easy to get lost in the stockpile of footage that you have. So it's just best, just when you get home, look at your footage, make a selects list, and get all of your best stuff right in front of you, just so you remember what it is. And then when you go back to actually make your project or continue working on your project, it's all going to be right there, and you're going to be comfortable putting it all together, and the flow is going to be established much easier. And this is tough. After a day of shooting, you're tired. You don't really want to do anything after that, but it's important. Just go look at your stuff and stay excited about the good stuff that you got, so it can't be lost in translation.